I've been sent what I think is another important document, which is a reply letter from Professor Philip Banfield, Chair of the Council of the British Medical Association, in correspondence with the Isle of Man's Minister for Health and Social Care, Mr Hooper. In his explosive letter, Mr Banfield makes it clear that this document is to be put into the public domain for transparency. What we don't know yet, though, what is the first correspondence from the Health Minister who is writing to the BMA. But we do know what he said in Tynwald on the matter in general, which included him accepting at this stage the findings of that expert report without any need to go to the police for a criminal investigation to conclude if the document have been interfered with, concocted or altered at the Dr Ranson tribunal. So here's the letter. Dear Mr Hooper, thank you for your letter of the 15th of May relating to my comments made concerning the case of Dr Rosalind Ranson, defended by the Department of Health and Social Care, the DHSC, which recently concluded awarding Dr Ranson £3.2 million and in the process destroying both Dr Ranson's career and her health. You have asked why I have not raised these issues directly with either yourself or with the Chief Executive of Manx. I visited the Isle of Man primarily to speak with Dr Ranson and to meet with the Isle of Man Medical Society, which I found extremely useful for my appreciation of both the case we had fought alongside Dr Ranson, as well as the wider issues that her case shines a light upon. During my visit, I met briefly with Ms Cope, the Chief Executive of Manx Care, to discuss ongoing pay issues. And I'll be returning to the Isle of Man soon to discuss the implications of both the Employment Tribunal's liability and remedy hearing judgments. You have implied that you do not believe there are safety or cultural issues due to the conclusions of the recent CQC, that's the Care Quality Commission's report, published on Monday the 22nd of May. Although the documents themselves state they were due to be in publication in January. I'd ask you to reflect on this position, given that the reports themselves say staff do not always feel confident in raising concerns. Having spoken with Dr Ranson and many other doctors, your conclusions are at odds with the experiences of many of those dedicated medical professionals who care for people of the Isle of Man. Your views are also at odds with the result of the Culture of Care Barometer survey developed by King's College and NHS England, as well as at odds with the CQC's own pilot report, which is no longer available as far as I can tell on the Manx government's website, but which described a feral culture. It is at odds with the treatment of the 4 anaesthetists charged with gross negligence manslaughter outside of due process, with all charges now dropped. It's worth noting that the CQC is not a regulator on the Isle of Man, but merely a provider of a contracted service to write reports that are unlike others I have seen and give no rating to indicate whether the Manx Care services meet any acceptable standards or indeed whether they may or may not be inadequate. You have asked why I intend to raise my concerns with the Minister responsible for the Crown dependencies. The decision of the Employment and Equality Tribunal in the case of Dr Ranson made for extremely sober reading. Dr Ranson was, in their words, subject to humiliation, bullying, harassment and vilification, and dismissed after she raised a number of serious concerns. Dr Ranson was awarded sums for aggravated and exemplary damages, both of which are exceptionally rare. These awards were made due to the DHSC's high-handed, malicious, insulting and oppressive manner during the course of the litigation and were warranted for their oppression, arbitrary and unconstitutional behaviour. This case is about the systemic destruction of an extraordinary, courageous and hard-working doctor who moved with her family to the Isle of Man to improve the health of the population. Because Dr Ranson had blown the whistle, slice by slice her role of medical director had been taken away from her. And besides being humiliated in front of her colleagues, her humiliation was apparent up to and including high levels of government and the Council of Ministers at a moment of peril as the Isle of Man, like the rest of the world, faced a novel pandemic. Given the litany of serious failings of the DHSC and the wider Manx government, why would the island's health minister not want these issues considered by the minister with overall responsibility? The BMA understands that the process has been set up by Tynwald to investigate some of these failings. However, our concern is the scope and the independence of the process and the provisions available to it. As it stands, the committee cannot compel witnesses to give evidence, an extraordinary omission given the seriousness of the allegations. In my view, the only possible way forward is a UK-led public inquiry, with powers commensurate to the significance of the situation to the people of the Isle of Man, able to independently hold those responsible to account and consider the wider systemic factors. You've asked me why I cancelled a scheduled meeting with you ahead of my visit. I cancelled the meeting because I wanted to spend additional time speaking with Dr Ranson, the victim of a sustained campaign perpetuated by your department and partially under your direction, which sought to discredit her. In the words of the tribunal, DHSE fought tooth and nail on a false basis to the substantial detriment of Dr Ranson and at the expense of taxpayers on the Isle of Man. Additionally, speaking to the wider medical society was something which I felt was important, and which proved to be so, given the dismay, anger and distress which was evident. Judging by the correspondence I have received since those I have met also felt that this was important. I'll be happy to meet with you to discuss these issues on my next visit to the Isle of Man. I am making public this response to you in the interests of transparency. Professor Philip Banfield, Chairman of Council, the British Medical Association. Well, Mr Cooper told me after the last sitting of Tynwald that he was unable to talk at that point due to another tribunal sitting on the issues concerning Dr Ranson. Well, that sitting is scheduled for next week, so we hope we might be addressing the various serious issues laid out after that, made by the British Medical Association, and of course I think everyone is wanting some answers to this very serious situation.